Hi guys, my name's Theo. I'm with Ben and Cowan here. We're Unknown Works. We are really excited to draw some dreams today. As you know, at the moment with our current situation that we find ourselves in, everyone's dreams are getting a little bit weird. And so for this exercise today, we've teamed up with Lockdown Dreams, an initiative based out of UCL. Out of the psychology department, and they've been dream catchers. They've been the Sandmen, collecting people's dreams. They've collected almost 1,000 dreams, and they want to get there. So if you haven't donated your dream so far, maybe you should do it after the event today. We are going to go through a process of just exploration. Not necessarily analysis, but just exploring the sort of inner depths of people's subconscious, and particularly the spatial. And what we're quite interested to see are the different qualities that people bring out in their minds during this current situation that we find ourselves in. What we would ask is if you guys would like to explore the different viewpoints we have going on. We're kind of doing a bit of experiment. It took a bit of time to set up. Of trying to get as many different kind of weird views of these dreams taking shape, and feel free to explore them through the Zoom interface, which is a space itself that we're quite excited to explore. But also take the opportunity to draw the dreams as well. We'd love for everybody to show their own sort of taking on the kind of weird dreams that someone's donated. So I don't know if you guys want to say anything more.
Yeah, so the dreams we've collected from Lockdown Dreams are up to about 1,000 of them, and we've just selected a few almost randomly. What we'll do is share a Google Doc link to some of those dreams that we'll be drawing. So if people want to explore a bit further in the Zoom chat in about 5 minutes, we'll share a link and you can click into that, and then you can kind of look what we'll be drawing real time. And yeah, I think that's it. So there's a series of point of view cameras we've set up for the duration of the draw. So use Zoom as an interface, as a space to explore. So you'll see some a point of view from the paintbrush, some are top down, and some of our other members of Unknown Works who will be reading some of the dreams as we go and do this performance piece. So we'll move over to the draw.
Just one last thing is that obviously, I think Theo's already said before, but we really invite you guys to draw along with us. We want this to be as participatory as possible. And so it's a chance for everyone to let loose a little bit on a Friday evening and have a bit of fun. So we hope you enjoy yourself, and we hope you enjoy the show as well.
Ready? Everything unmuted as well?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted now.
Cool.
Hi, just to introduce myself. I'm Soraya. I'm from Lockdown Dreams. We're a collective of postgraduate students at UCL's Psychoanalysis Unit. And as Theo said, we are trying to gather dreams during this lockdown to make sense of how the daily disruption to our lives has been experienced unconsciously through our dreams. So just a bit of background on the project. We began at the end of March, shortly after the UK lockdown. Essentially, me and a couple of the other project team members realized that we were having quite vivid, memorable dreams, and a short look through social media showed us that we weren't the only ones. So we thought it would be a really fascinating study to collect and perhaps even eventually analyze these lockdown dreams and see what kind of themes we can find, and really to get an idea about how unconsciously we are experiencing this pandemic as a collective. So that's all from me. Also, if you could submit more dreams, that would be fantastic, just so that we can get more data, which will help to give us a better understanding of really how our unconscious lives have been affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. And to submit, you go on lockdowndreams.com and just click on submit a dream. It literally takes 5 minutes and it would really help us out. So.
Okay. I'm going to start with dream number 1. The dream takes place on an island. The island is special. There are ferries that bring you to it, and from there you can travel to other places by ferry as well. It's like an interchange. An island you must pass through in order to travel further. On the island, there are some kinds of camp buildings. There were small houses, toilets, and the showers are communal and are in special buildings only for that purpose as well. The story is happening like this. There were around 20 to 30 people in the camp. We were not allowed to leave that island or tell anyone else that we are being held hostage here. Even though there were people who were going through the island to the ferries to travel. The camp was in a kind of ruins. Nothing was working properly, and we didn't know how to leave. The people who were keeping us there were some kind of national security, so we had nowhere to go. There were fights. People would get hurt by small bombs. They would get tortured. The dream ended when we were trying to slip a person that someone in the camp knew through the security to let others, although I'm not sure who that was, know about our situation. What is important is that those people who were just passing through to the other ferries, they didn't even pay any attention to what was happening in the camp, even though they could see everything. This was not a recurring dream. I felt scared because I was feeling trapped and confused. The setting wasn't familiar at all.
Alex will now read Dream 2.
In the dream, I had moved to a new house. This is a recurring theme in my dreams generally. When I moved in there was quite literally an elephant in one of the rooms. It left, but I was determined to get it back again. The house, the quite desolate landscape. However, a short way up the very beautiful but barren landscape in which the grounds were dark purple with glints of emerald green and ruby red. Though it was dark, the sun was at risk of burning you. One part of it was somehow part of an industrial landscape, industrial complex, and was off limits. But the landscape also rolled on indefinitely, with people individually or in small groups exploring it. I set off to have a look, but was very conscious of keeping my bearings so I could return to the more normal landscape. My husband had been with me, but disappeared from sight. Towards the end of the dream, it seemed that there was information about the landscape which wasn't being shared.
Alex will now reread Dream 2.
Moved to the room generally. Quite lit an elephant in one of the rooms. It left, but I was determined to get it back. Up the road, you enter a very beautiful city in which the ground
Cameron will now read Dream 3.
In the dream, I was just in my bed. I'd woken up in the way I usually do most nights, just as day is breaking, and the light comes through my window. One of my windows was sort of open, and I remember thinking, I hope no insects get in. Then, a pigeon came up to the window's opening. I pretended to be asleep, staying as still as possible, worried that any sudden motion would scare it and prompt it to fly into my room. Not long after, it started speaking to me. It spoke with an exaggerated New York, Brooklyn accent and reminded me a bit of the Monopoly Man. Yet, it still looked like a pigeon. It started yelling at me. Finally, you're home. I fly past your room 3 times a year. Migratory patterns, you know. And you're never in. But finally, you're home. I've got an offer to make you. I want to buy your house. When I insisted that I couldn't sell the house, as it was my parents', got aggressive. Started throwing hundreds of $100 bills in through the window, shouting that it would take my house whether I accepted or not. After this, I don't remember anything.
Alex will now read Dream 4.
I suppose this is technically a reoccurring dream, as it contains reoccurring themes. In the past, I had often dreamed of finding a new area in my home I've been living in. When we lived in a high-rise apartment on the top floor, I would often dream of taking the elevator up to a secret floor above us and discovering an abandoned living space or secret restaurant or nightclub. In our second apartment, which was a triplex, I often dreamt about breaking through the wall in our bathroom and discovering a second, fancier bathroom on the other side. Interestingly, I had never had a dream like this in our first home that we once owned. Now in lockdown, in our newer home, this theme has returned. I'll read it again. I suppose that this is technically a reoccurring dream, as it contains reoccurring themes. In the past, I'd often dreamt of finding a new area in a home I'd been living in. When we lived in a high-rise apartment on the top floor, I would often dream of taking the elevator up to a secret floor above ours and discovering an abandoned living space or secret restaurant or nightclub. In our second apartment, which was a triplex, I often dreamt about breaking through the wall into a bathroom and discovering a nicer, second, fancier bathroom on the other side. Interestingly, I had never had dreamt like this in our first home that we owned. Now in lockdown, our newer home, this theme has returned.
Alex will now reread Dream 4.
I suppose that this is technically a reoccurring dream, as it contains reoccurring themes. In the past, I had often dreams of finding a new area in a home I'd been living in. When we lived in a high-rise apartment on the top floor, I would often dream of taking the elevator up to the second secret floor above ours and discovering an abandoned living space or secret restaurant or nightclub. In our second apartment, which was a triplex, I often dreamed about breaking through the walls in our bathroom and discovering a second, fancier bathroom on the other side. Interestingly, I had never had a dream like this in the first home that we owned. Now in lockdown, in our newer home, this theme has returned.
Cameron will now read Dream 5.
I dreamt that we, me and my partner, were in St. Ives. We had been summoned there from our house in Bristol. And bad things were happening in the town. First, it was just small things. Clean washing was muddied. The cricket pitch dug up. Then, people started being hurt. Our landlady, in the dream, she was our friend Laura, weirdly, was tied up and stuffed into an understair cupboard. Then, someone was killed. Everybody was getting very jumpy and scared. Our landlady said, "It's the thing. It comes every 100 years or so, and we have to find it and send it away. We know the right thing to do, but we have to find the thing first." So my partner and I hunted the town for it, not knowing what it looked like. It might have been invisible for all we know. We know St. Ives well. It's full of little nooks, and we searched everywhere. Eventually, we found something that really gave us the shudders outside of an antiques shop. It was propped up on the ground next to some old cricket bats and other things. A piece of driftwood. It was tall, shaped a bit like a cricket bat, with two dark holes, like eyes at the top. It was a beautiful shape and patina to the wood. A bit like a Barbara Hepworth sculpture, but somehow sinister. When we asked them, the people said they couldn't come close. They looked at it, out of an upper window, the other side of the lane. They said, "Yeah, that's it, all right." They told us it wouldn't harm us because we were two women together. And they said we should wrap it up in 4 cotton cloths. So we did. And the old woman came with a cart. We put it in the cart, dragged it to the quayside. It's a long jetty that sticks out into the harbour. This bit was rather horrible. The thing on the cart, very, very heavy and hard to pull. Then it started struggling and crying. Wrappings started to come undone. Horrible little arms came struggling out to shove them back inside again. The old women said it always does this. It's to try and make you feel sorry for it. Then we had to wait for hours until the tide was full, waiting for it to turn. Out. An extra high tide was due that night. And gradually it got dark as we stood at the end of the harbor wall that juts out into the bay, with the thing struggling and squirming in its wraps and crying piteously. All the people had their windows facing the sea wide open. We waited until the bats came out in the dusk and the water was at last beginning to ebb. Then we hoisted the heavy thing and its cloths out of the cart and hurled it as far as we could into the water. As the bats swooped around us, making little squeaking cries, and the thing sank, and the water steadily washed out of the harbor, and all the women of the town called from their windows, "Go home." Long, strange calls like owls hooting. Go home. We couldn't understand what they were saying at first. But then, after quite a lot of this, they came down to us and shook us by the hands and said it would be all right now, because the bats in the water would carry it away to where it was all right. The bats could deal with it somehow. And that was that. Everything sorted. The dark night, the ebbing tide, the flitting bats and the owls, and the wise women calling into the night, and the crying, pitiful, malevolent thing gone back to where it was harmless.
Hannah will now read Dream 7.
Yesterday, I had a dream that I removed the pain in my chest and made it sit on a chair opposite me in order to have a face-to-face chat. It had no face. It was black and solid, like a piece of volcanic rock, about the size of a cat. We sat. It felt good to stare each other down.
Dream 7 will now be read by Hannah.
I was on an internet interface where I could see my face framed in the computer screen. I looked carefully at my face and grey hair and began to notice and focus my attention on the overly large and pendulous jowls that hang down in two halves, from the underside of my chin to my chest. At the bottom of each jowl, where they touch my upper chest, I notice they are formed of two gonad-sized spheres, encased in saggy, scrotal, dark pink skin. Each gonad sphere is shaped like a coronavirus cell, with protruding points showing through, but encased inside the skin. The skin is goose-pimpled, like a scrotal sac, but there are no pubic hairs, just a mass of saggy skin, which moves when I speak. I am so disturbed by the sight, it wakes me up. Since having the dream, it has had an effect on making me very aware of my aging neck when using internet webcams.
Hannah will now reread Dream 7 for the last time.
I was on an internet interface where I could see my face framed in the computer screen. I looked carefully at my face and grey hair and began to notice and focus my attention on the overly large and pendulous jowls that hang down in two halves, from under my chin to my chest. At the bottom of each jowl, where they touch my upper chest, I notice they are formed of two gonad-sized spheres, encased in saggy, scrotal, dark pink skin. Each gonad sphere is shaped like a coronavirus cell, with protruding points showing through, but encased inside the skin. The skin is goose-pimpled like a scrotal sac, but there are no pubic hairs, just a mass of saggy skin, which moves when I speak. I am so disturbed by the sight, it wakes me up. Since having the dream, it has had an effect of making me very aware of my aging neck when using internet webcams.
That is the end of our painting. We'll now go for a bit of Q&A.
Whoa! We're pretty hot. That was a lot of fun, and I think the brushes might have been a little bit too thick, but what we hope we've done is create a new construction that joins together a lot of different narratives and multiple narratives that are going on in people's brains at the moment. I had, and I'm sure these guys have had quite recently, a dream and a dream and a dream and a dream. And this is kind of what we've done today. It's kind of an experiment. And I think we're probably going to do it again. It's a narrative construction.
We want to have a quick conversation with Soraya from Lockdown Dreams. When we started the project and engaged her from an early stage, it was quite interesting to discuss and analyze how an architect, someone who deals very spatially and visually as a method interpreting some of these dreams that they collected. But obviously Soraya from Dreams and from a point of view of psychoanalysis, they'll look at dreams very differently and looking at particular themes, correlations. So we had a kind of have an open conversation with her now, we had a couple of questions which I thought would be quite interesting to discuss as a kind of a capping finale from this exercise. So I think Soraya is there. Seb, is Soraya unmuted? So one of the questions, I guess, that we're interested in, which maybe Soraya can start with, which is really what she and her team from UCL have learned from the collection of their dreams. I know they've collected almost 1,000, and they've been sifting through, and there's a kind of an extensive form that people filled out. Some of you online have probably filled them out yourselves, but I guess as a starting point, I mean, that would be quite interesting. So Soraya, I want you to kind of just talk about your findings, your initial findings.
Hi, yeah, that would be great. We've had some really interesting submissions, as you might have been able to tell. I mean, people have incredible unconscious dream lives. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways that we've had. So 75% of our submitters reported that they're having more vivid dreams during lockdown. And I'm not sure if you can hear me now because it might have frozen.
We can hear you.
Did it freeze or did you freeze?
No, we can hear you. Keep going.
Your face is...
Okay. Well, if you can still hear me, that's the main point. So basically, we went into this wanting to learn more about how the COVID-19 lockdown has disrupted our daily lives unconsciously through dream life, and by extension also how the socio and political are inscribed in the psyche. So there's a lot of imagery we've seen taking in various bits of what people have experienced throughout the day, then expressed in dream life as well. So we found a number of themes that quite aligned with what we might have expected given it's a time of high anxiety. The first big theme is frustration. So we've seen, there's a real sense that people are feeling thwarted in their aims and objectives within the dream. This was especially the case at the beginning of lockdown when physical movement was most restricted. There were a lot of dreams that featured people getting thwarted in some way. The second big theme that we found is persecution and anxiety. So this is manifested in people being followed, chased, or encountering unsavory and aggressive characters, whether people or animals within the dream. So this is particularly the case in something like the St. Ives dream that just turns quite dark, really. And there's a kind of aggressive character, which is the thing that the dreamer is trying to find. We've also seen various manifestations of COVID. So for example, this is the anxiety of growing COVID on your face was likened to growing a scrotum on your face, which that was an interesting translation of the fear of getting COVID and almost the embarrassment associated with it, connected to then how we are all functioning on Zoom and how he thought people might see him and see the COVID growing on his face. So the third big theme is regression. And we've seen examples of this in people's exes popping up in dreams, or school friends and colleagues in the past that show up in a dream, actions taking place in former places of work or other locations, and sometimes even estranged or departed members of the family showing up in dreams. So things like dead relatives.
It's all right. I wonder if we can maybe steer the conversation also towards, I wonder if any sort of architectural spaces or the idea of space has ever cropped up within dreams that you've received, and how people are sort of interacting with that during this lockdown.
Hugely. It's really interesting the way that the different settings for dreams has popped up. I mean, there were so many already in the ones that you drew. We've seen a lot of people in their houses, a lot of bodies of water, people in places of transit, and generally in closed spaces, which I guess would be interesting for architects. So there's kind of, it varies. The settings vary also, we think, because of everyone has different residues. So daily residues from your life, which are things places you go or kind of settings you interact with in your day, often become the setting for your dreams through your unconscious. So we think that's why there's such a variation. But also in terms of the fact that we've seen a lot of closed spaces, which I assume that you guys would be really interested in, we think there's a certain pleasure of being inside a determinate space. So there's a psychoanalyst named Donald Meltzer who said that being inside a closed space represents the reliance on security of the determinate space as a protective structure. So kind of imagining yourself in a house that's enclosed almost gives you a sense of safety. And then in the the pigeon dream, there's a break in the distinction between interior and exterior, where the pigeon is intruding into the person's room. So I guess I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, it's we just in reflection of when we were hearing the dreams and thinking about it, it did seem the idea of domesticity and that invasion of domesticity was such a prevalent thing. And obviously that has many implications for architects and our experiences of space. I wonder, because we have about 10 minutes left, if we can open this up to a Q&A session with those who are attending, to voice kind of their impressions, maybe some questions or comments about the process that we've enacted today, and to just sort of hear everyone else's thoughts, really. Yeah, it'd be good to open it up to the floor. If anyone does have any questions, I think there's an option to raise a hand and we can unmute you.
Can I ask just about the experience of drawing collectively, for the three of you? How it feels like a very kind of from this a bird's eye view, it feels like a very kind of premeditated process, but obviously was not. And just what was that experience like for you, negotiating each other's kind of graphic techniques?
Well, what's quite interesting actually is because we were muted, I think you guys didn't quite hear the amount of communication that was taking place. But I think we wanted everything to, we took a concept from talking with Soraya, which was the formation of dreams comes as sort of quite sporadic moments within people's minds, and they don't necessarily have a narrative until you recollect them at the end of your dreaming. So what that was quite interesting for us, because we kind of took sporadic bits of the dream personally, and what we tried to do towards the end, as I think you might have seen, was to try to weave a narrative throughout them all to connect them, which sort of mirrored the way that we believe sort of dreaming occurs and your memories of dreams occur. But in terms of graphic style, I'll leave that to Theo, who's
Well, I think as architects, we draw incessantly, and I think we think intuitively and like spatially, or at least I hope so. But I think what and I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Soraya, is I think a lot of dreams is to do with symbology, and it's about the sort of meaning that you put on them to try and understand them. And I suppose there are a couple of tropes that we sort of brought into the drawing, and we did discuss before, which was to do with, if you're always going to draw feet, they're always going to be barefoot. If you're going to draw buildings, they're going to kind of have this kind of symbology. And I think it's about getting that sort of universality through into this joined up piece. But certainly as three individuals, we all draw in a completely different way, and we both have a different way of dealing with these quite cumbersome brushes. I think like we draw very differently.
But actually, that was something that was quite nice in that the medium itself, in using these brushes and these long poles, we were unable actually to kind of really effectively bring about our own individual styles. We were quite limited. And so that, I hope we kind of communicated that through, that the style is sort of really pretty much determined by the tools that we made. So
I guess it's a kind of choreography where maybe we did partly successfully, but the idea is that we need to keep our distance while we're drawing, and originally we were thinking we could just draw around an A1 sheet, but obviously within the current climate, how do we negotiate that? And they kind of lent themselves hand in hand. Well, we could have these long appendages, which also then we could film a point of view, which point of view was quite interesting for us because we're dealing with third person, first person, which again, a lot of the dreams we're reading were also describing certain things in first person and third person, but also negotiating with one another with something which is unfamiliar, and should try and keep our distances around the same dream rather than drawing separate dreams individually. So, and that's really what comes in as the dreamscape, the idea that the whole process is meant to be collaborative, the way in which we collect the dreams, but also the way in which we propose a new method to draw those dreams.
And then I think the other thing is that we sit next to each other every single day for the whole day. We're still not sick of each other. And so I think hopefully we've got some kind of communication going that works.
You're probably dreaming in sync.
Subconsciously, and it kind of like this telepathy that goes through our brain. But like all of we've done quite a lot of these sort of large scale drawings before, and they've been a lot messier than this, and usually with hands and a little bit of like taking some ink and going about, and a lot more body type stuff. And I think we're going to probably go down a little bit more of the detail route, and hopefully it'll be fun. But we've really enjoyed the process.
Guys, we've got a few questions coming in. So Hattie Oliphant, I'll unmute you, Hattie. You're there?
Yeah, I just wanted to know which images best resonated with the three of you and why.
Which images or which images?
The pigeon. Really
The
enjoyed.
pigeon.
But I think there was a really quite intense dream, and the kind of two dreams that kind of merged together for us when we were looking through the full set. And one of them sort of came through last minute, and the other one was a little bit before. And we sort of found the links with them. One of them was to do with this big black mass that was this sort of like this beast that was kind of roaming in Ives. And hopefully you guys have got the Google Doc, and you can kind of skim through the dreams now and have a look at what the actual text was if you didn't hear it before. But it's about this blob that kind of like they got to find it, and it's kind of unruly and uncontrollable, and then eventually it's dumped in the sea. And then we found the link with this quite intense dream, which is talking about, and it was a short one, just talking about taking this mass of this sadness out of the body and placing it in front of you. And it reminded us of, we were like discussing it a couple of tests. It reminds us of the scene in the Third Policeman where the main character is talking to the guy that he's just killed. And it's this kind of talking to your subconscious, but as a thing that's detached from you, and putting it into a space that you can understand, which is like putting this black mass on a chair that you can start talking to. I mean, I think I don't know if Soraya, if you want to talk a little bit more about that in those interlinked dreams a little bit. But we sort of found it really interesting, the sort of spatial qualities that were kind of, it was testing in those dreams.
We've got a couple more questions. Why don't we just take, because we've not got so very much time, and then maybe Soraya can kind of come back in at the end. So Bobby, Jewel, I'm going to unmute you. Bobby, you've got the mic.
Hi, yeah. Quite a generic question, really. Just like expiring the the dialectics there between like the kind of really subjective experience of dreams and obviously subjective experience of urban space and like through architects, and like how do you kind of like narrate that as architects, being like how do you kind of like allow for subjective experiences and then also like but have like a singular approach to your design?
Guys, I'm also going to give the mic to Rebecca Faulkner just to ask her question, because we've got so very long, and then maybe you can answer both of those. Rebecca, oh, no, sorry. Rebecca, you've got the mic.
Hi, great. That was really enjoyable. I actually did quite a similar performance last year, which was words become marks and marks become words, where a word score was given to performers who then translated those into physical marks, and those physical marks were then retranslated into word score. And I suppose my question is, I noticed you just spoke about the fact that you selected the dreams, and whether in that process of selecting you came with a preconceived idea of what you were going to draw, or whether it came about organically through the process.
I think some of them questions are slightly related, I guess, in terms of subjectivity. I think to answer the last question first, we had a lot of conversations about how we could make it as objective as possible, but it's impossible. And you're right, completely from the selection process, what are the right questions? What are the right questions to ask Soraya? Do we randomly select dreams? Do we select dreams that maybe have spatial qualities, and therefore really we try and narrow what we're looking for, which is actually the nature of space presence in some of these dreams, which I think we did go towards. We weren't aiming to have them purely architectural, and I think some of them weren't. I think the way in which we then interpret and draw them is completely subjective. The idea, and that was kind of really why we wanted the three people to draw it at the same time, so at least there was there wasn't a singular subjective version of it. It was actually, there was some sort of negotiation, collaboration with it, but subjectively, yeah, it runs throughout. I guess the importance was to draw a number of dreams the same way and we acknowledge that it's highly subjective, but at least there's a point of comparison in which we can understand them. And further to that, the way in which we kind of went about them was, you would maybe see in the chat bar the Google Doc link of the dreams, and simply, we didn't spend too much time on this, but simply we went through the passage and we selected, we rounded it down to filter out. So one was about place, any mentions which was about place, one was about object, was about character, one was about emotion, or whether something was emotive. And then from then that's how we then compared them and we drew the similar things between them. But yeah.
But as a sort of evolution of the drawing itself, we very much, the way we choreographed it amongst us was to say, one of us begins marking and then we grow from that. So there was very little preconceived notion of kind of what exactly we were going to be marking out. That was quite an organic process. But I think we definitely discussed the themes beforehand so that we were each clear about the highlights that we wanted to show.
Thanks, guys. That's been fantastically entertaining and a surprising hour. I have to say my most memorable dream from the last 10 weeks has been, I came back to my flat to discover Phineas Harper had allowed the graduating students from the University of Westminster to install their end-of-year exhibition in my flat. which is entirely likely kind of experience. There's nothing very unusual about that at all.